While I was on a business trip across the country, my parents sold my dream sports car to fund my sister's luxury getaway. When I walked back through their front door, jet-lagged and hopeful, my mom looked me dead in the eye and sneered, "Thanks to your car, our daughter is having the time of her life." I actually chuckled. Not because it was funny, but because the truth hit me so hard it almost knocked the air out of my lungs. She snapped instantly. "What's so funny?" Her smile vanished the moment I told her, because the car they sold was never mine to give, and what came after shattered everything I thought I knew about family. I'm Nova Callahan, and this is the story I never thought I'd have to tell. Before I share it with you, I'd love to know you're here with me and listening to me. Comment hi below or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if you find yourself caring about what happens next, please consider subscribing. It means more than you know to have someone listen and understand, even just for a few minutes. My name is Nova Callahan. I'm 30 years old, living in Austin, Texas, and if you asked anyone who knows my family, they'd tell you I'm the logical one. The kid who never needed anything, never complained, never asked for a thing. That label followed me from childhood into adulthood, while my younger sister Sienna was treated like a fragile glass figurine, precious, delicate, deserving of every room she walked into. I learned early on that in my family, independence wasn't just encouraged, it was expected of me. Demanded, even as if needing nothing was the only acceptable way to exist. Maybe that's why the garage behind my grandfather's old ranch house became the only place where I ever felt truly seen. I still remember sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor, the air thick with the smell of motor oil and metal dust, country music crackling through the old radio in the corner. My grandfather Callahan Sr. would lift the hood of his first-generation Dodge Viper and tell me, "Machines don't lie to you, kid. You treat them right, they'll give you everything they've got." He let me place my palm on the warm engine block one evening, the sun dipping behind the mesquite trees, and something clicked in my chest. That moment became a quiet promise I made to myself one day I'd have a Viper of my own. But promises don't protect you from family dynamics. My mother Lorraine spent years drilling one message into me: be the strong one, be the stable one, take care of others. Sienna, according to her, needed more. More attention, more comfort, more chances, more protection. If Sienna wanted dance lessons, she got them. If she wanted a new wardrobe before school started, she got that too. Meanwhile, I got lectures about sacrifice, about discipline, about how a man doesn't need much. He just needs to keep moving forward. I told myself I didn't mind, but the truth is, even as a kid, I felt the imbalance like a stone pressing on my ribs. By the time I hit my 20s, I'd left Bourne and moved to Austin, trading small-town expectations for the grind of corporate finance. I worked myself raw, long nights, early mornings, ramen for dinner, spreadsheets burned into my retinas. But every time the exhaustion pushed too hard, I'd pull up the photo of the cobalt blue Viper I kept taped inside my wallet. That picture kept me steady, a reminder that I wasn't building this life for anyone else. I was building it for the part of me that once sat on a garage floor and believed in something. At 30, after years of disciplined saving and refusing to let setbacks crush me, I finally bought it, a 1996 Dodge Viper GTS in cobalt blue, the exact model my grandfather once rebuilt. The day I drove it home, the engine rumble vibrating through my bones, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't pride. It was proof. Proof that the hard parts of my life meant something. Proof that I wasn't wrong for wanting more than the role my family assigned me. My family, of course, didn't see it that way. To them, the car wasn't a milestone, it was flashy, unnecessary, a phase. They didn't understand how deeply it all ran, and maybe they didn't care to. But what truly unsettled me was how often they brought up Sienna those days, how she was exhausted, emotionally drained, struggling, how she needed a break from life despite never paying for the life she lived. Every conversation seemed to circle back to her fragility. And as much as I tried to ignore it, something in my gut whispered that my family was gearing up to make a choice that would cost me more than they realized. I didn't yet know what was coming, but I could feel the air shift the way animals sense a storm before any cloud appears on the horizon. The storm began to gather the morning my boss called me into her office, sunlight slanting across the glass table like a spotlight. She told me I'd been chosen to lead a negotiation trip to Seattle to represent our firm with a major Japanese partner. It was the kind of assignment that rewrote careers, the kind that positioned you for leadership. I felt the weight of it immediately, a rare mix of pressure and hope threading together in my chest. 3 weeks in Seattle. 3 weeks away from home. 3 weeks where I'd have to leave the Viper behind. I didn't think much of it at first, not until Austin made the evening news again for a streak of luxury car break-ins just a few miles from my apartment complex. The thought of coming home to find shattered glass on the asphalt and an empty parking spot made my stomach twist. I spent the next 2 days debating where to keep the car: a friend's place, a rental garage on the outskirts of the city, or my parents' home in Bourne. Bourne felt safe. Small town, quiet streets, neighbors who still borrowed sugar instead of avoiding eye contact. My father had always kept his own truck spotless and under lock and key. Against my better judgment, I convinced myself the car would be fine there. When I pulled up to the house, my father stepped outside, squinting against the Texas sun, and the look on his face, genuine admiration, maybe even pride, softened something old and brittle in me. But the moment Lorraine stepped out onto the porch, I felt it snap right back. Her eyes didn't shine with recognition or sentiment. They narrowed, assessing, disapproving. "That car looks too expensive," she said flatly, as if I'd rolled up with a problem instead of an accomplishment. Not everything flashy is meant for a grown man. Before irritation had time to take root, Kai pulled into the driveway behind me. Kai Mercer, my partner, the only person who understood the emotional and mechanical language I spoke. He took one look at my mother's expression, and one look at my father's awe, and he pulled me aside. "I don't trust this," he whispered. "Your family doesn't respect what this car means to you. I have the replica in my garage. Let's switch them before you leave." The replica looked identical at a glance, same silhouette, same cobalt paint, same stripes, but the engine, the soul, wasn't the same. And yet Kai wasn't wrong. My family didn't understand the value of the Viper. They never had. After an hour of talking it through, I agreed. We switched the cars in the garage while my parents made dinner. They didn't notice the difference. The next morning, as I dragged my suitcase toward the door, my mother stopped me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "When you come home," she said, "there'll be a wonderful surprise waiting. Something the whole family can enjoy." She said it lightly, but the weight of it pressed on me. I tried to brush it off, tried to believe she was talking about a new kitchen appliance or maybe redecorating the living room. But then during our last dinner before my trip, Sienna mentioned a Caribbean cruise all her friends were planning. She sighed dramatically, complaining about how she couldn't afford it, how unfair life felt, how she deserved a little escape. The way my mother glanced at me, then a slow, deliberate look, made my entire body tense. "Family helps family," she said softly, almost coaxing. I didn't answer. I didn't even look up. I just chewed my food and pretended not to feel the ground shifting beneath me. Because deep down in the place where instinct curls tight like a fist, I already knew the storm wasn't coming. It was already here. Seattle greeted me with a cold drizzle that never seemed to end. The gray sky sat so low it felt like it pressed on my shoulders, a stark contrast to the dry Texas heat I was used to. My hotel room overlooked a street glistening with rain, and every night after meetings I sat by the window, laptop open, rewriting presentations until the early hours. This project mattered. It could change the entire trajectory of my career. But no matter how deeply I buried myself in work, a sharp unease kept tugging at me, quiet at first, then louder. I called home the second night. My father sounded cheerful, telling me he had started the car exactly as I instructed, letting it run for 15 minutes. He even remarked how smooth it sounded. My mother, on the other hand, barely offered a sentence. "The car is fine, Nova. Stop worrying about small things." Her tone wasn't dismissive in the usual way. It was tight, rushed, as if she needed to hang up. The next morning, a message from her popped up during my commute. "Sienna is bright again. Thanks to something wonderful you'll see when you return." She didn't elaborate. She didn't add emojis or her usual end-of-text punctuation. It felt off. My family wasn't subtle, but this felt like an intentional omission. Then Kai called. His voice was calm, but the tension underneath was obvious. "I've tried calling your mom twice," he said. She answered, but her tone. Nova, it's not right. She was short, almost defensive. I think something's going on that they're not telling you. The unease tightened into something colder. I kept checking the family group chat, hoping for something normal. One afternoon, they sent a photo of my parents and Sienna smiling in the driveway, arms linked. But behind them, the garage door stood open, and the car wasn't there. When I asked about it, my father quickly replied, "Old photo. Don't worry." But the shirts they wore were the ones they'd worn in another photo posted that same morning. Their lie wasn't even well constructed. That night, while preparing for a midnight rehearsal with our Japanese partners, I received a text from our old neighbor, Mrs. Halstead. She never messaged, unless it was important. Nova dear, I saw a truck tow your car last week. I assumed you were moving. My chest tightened. I wanted to call immediately, confront them, demand real answers, but I was already being pulled into a crucial meeting. I shoved the phone into my pocket, barely hearing the rain hammering against the glass as I stepped into the conference room. When the meeting ended, I stood outside the building, rain soaking through my blazer hair, dripping cold water down my neck. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother appeared on the screen. Sienna is enjoying the trip she deserves. No mention of the car. No explanation. Only that. The rain blurred the words, but the meaning was painfully clear. Something was very, very wrong. The final presentation in Seattle ended with a signed agreement, handshakes, and congratulations. I should have felt triumphant, but the entire time my team celebrated, the only thing on my mind was a cobalt blue Viper sitting in a garage that might no longer be a garage. I booked an earlier flight and didn't tell my parents. I needed clarity, and I needed it without their rehearsed excuses. Back in Austin, the warm air felt heavier than usual. I didn't even go home first. I drove straight to Bourne, eyes fixed on the road, replaying every unanswered question. The sun was starting to set when I turned into my parents' driveway. Their garage door was wide open, and the replica Viper was nowhere inside. My heart hammered as I stepped out of the car. Before I could knock, my mother opened the door. Her expression wasn't surprised. It was irritated, almost inconvenienced, like my early arrival interrupted her evening. "Where's the car?" I asked. My voice was calm, but something inside me was splintering. She crossed her arms, chin lifting with that familiar, righteous confidence. "Thanks to your car, your sister is having the time of her life." There was a ringing in my ears. A wave of heat rolled across my face, but instead of shouting, I laughed. A short, breathless sound I didn't recognize coming from myself. Not humor, just disbelief so sharp it needed an exit. My mother's eyes narrowed. "What's funny, Nova?" Behind her, my father stood frozen in the hallway, guilt written across his posture. I looked between them, my pulse thudding like a drum. Something inside me snapped into place, not rage, not yet, just a clarity so sharp it steadied me. "What exactly did you do?" I asked. My mother waved a hand dismissively. "We sold it. We got a good price too. And don't start lecturing us, your sister needed a break. She's on a Caribbean cruise right now, getting the rest she deserves." My stomach twisted. "How much did you sell it for?" My father swallowed hard. My mother refused to look at me. When they finally said the number, it wasn't just low, it was insulting. They hadn't researched, they hadn't appraised. They hadn't even asked Kai. They just wanted fast money. "You sold it that fast?" I asked quietly, without calling me, without asking anything, without even wondering if it was insured correctly or if it was the right car. My mother bristled. "Stop overreacting. It's only a car. Family comes first." I took a step closer, letting the silence stretch. I could see their confidence faltering under it. Finally, I said it. Slowly, clearly. "The car you sold wasn't mine." And the room seemed to freeze around us, every lie, every justification, every assumption they ever made collapsing in on itself as they waited for an explanation they were nowhere near prepared to hear. I stood in my parents' living room, the echo of my own words still hanging in the stale air. "The car you sold wasn't mine." Their faces shifted, confusion, disbelief, then horror creeping in, slow and irreversible. My mother's hand slipped from her crossed arms. My father's jaw slackened as if the muscles had simply stopped working. I explained everything, that Kai and I switched cars before my trip, that the real Viper, my Viper, was safe in Austin, that the one they sold belonged entirely to him. The more I spoke, the paler my mother became, the more sweat gathered at the collar of my father's shirt. You sold a car that wasn't yours, I said, a car you had no legal right to touch. My father sank heavily into the dining chair. Nova, are you telling me we committed a crime? You forged signatures. You used the wrong VIN. You issued a bill of sale for property you didn't own. My mother snapped back to life, clutching at her last defense. You should have told us. You should have said something. How were we supposed to know it wasn't the same car? That doesn't excuse anything, I replied. You didn't ask. You didn't check. You didn't even hesitate. The resentment I'd buried for decades rose with every word, not just about the car, but every moment I'd been expected to sacrifice while Sienna was shielded from the consequences of her own choices. Before they could respond, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Is this Nova Callahan? Yes. This is Elliot Granger. I purchased the Dodge from your parents. The paperwork isn't valid. The signatures don't match the state records and the VIN isn't real. I'd like an explanation before I contact law enforcement. My father's face crumpled. My mother pressed a hand to her chest as though the air had turned poisonous. Give me an hour, I told Elliot. I'll sort this out. And I hung up. That was when my phone rang again. Sienna, her voice bright and careless under Caribbean music in the background. Nova, did Mom tell you I'm finally on a real vacation? Isn't that fun? I clenched my jaw. Sienna, why did Mom think selling my car was okay? Oh, come on, it's just a car. You make good money, you can buy another. Besides, it was sitting in the garage doing nothing. So, you knew, I said quietly. A pause. Then a weak attempt at innocence. I might have mentioned that you weren't using it. And Mom said she'd figure something out. I didn't think she'd, actually sell it. She didn't sound guilty. She sounded annoyed that her getaway was being interrupted. Sienna, I said, Elliot is threatening to call the police. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a crime. Another pause, longer this time, followed by a defensive huff. Why are you being so dramatic? We're family. Family should help each other. Family. Help. Words they used only when I was the one expected to sacrifice. And then the final blow came later that night when Elliot sent another message. If I don't receive an explanation and my money back, I will file a criminal complaint. My parents stared at the message with the same dread as someone watching a fire creep toward the house. For the first time in my life, the weight of our family's dysfunction wasn't just emotional, it was legal, tangible, and rapidly closing in. The walls felt too tight, the air too thin, and the realization hit me hard. This wasn't a simple mistake. This wasn't ignorance. This was the culmination of years of entitlement, favoritism, and avoidance. And now the consequences were no longer optional. By morning, the weight of the situation had grown so heavy I could feel it in my bones. The first thing I did was call Dana Whitlock, a colleague turned friend who specialized in criminal law. We met at her office downtown and I laid out every detail from the swap with Kai to Elliot's threats. Her expression darkened with every sentence. Nova, she said, your parents are looking at multiple charges. Unauthorized sale of property, forgery, fraudulent transfer, and depending on how Elliot frames it, potentially felony theft. The words landed like blows. 4 to 15 years behind bars, those were the numbers she mentioned. Hearing them from a lawyer made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. My parents weren't malicious people, but they were careless, entitled, and so used to bending me that they didn't realize the world didn't bend in the same direction. Dana pushed a stack of notes toward me. Even if Elliot agrees to a private resolution, the state can still intervene if they view this as intentional fraud. Your family doesn't have much room to hide. When I returned to Bourne, the atmosphere reminded me of a funeral home, silent, heavy, the air thick with dread. My mother looked smaller, somehow stripped of her usual certainty. My father couldn't meet my eyes. Dana says prison is a possibility, I told them. This isn't something we can ignore. My mother trembled. Nova, please. We didn't mean. This isn't about intentions, I interrupted. This is about actions, and the consequences are real. We reviewed the contract they'd signed with Elliot. It was a disaster incorrect VN forged signature wildly undervalued price. The kind of document that didn't just look sloppy, but fraudulent. Later that afternoon, Kai and I drove to meet Elliot at a cafe halfway between our cities. He arrived with a folder under his arm and an expression that said he'd already rehearsed speaking to a judge. We want to resolve this without escalating things, I began. We can refund your full payment and additional compensation. He studied us carefully. I'm willing to return the car if I'm made whole, but I won't tolerate being lied to again. A deal, fragile but possible, formed between us. Money back plus damages. It could work. It could save my parents. But the moment we presented the repayment plan to my family, Sienna reacted exactly as I feared. I'm not paying anything, she said. I didn't sign anything. This isn't my problem. You benefited from the theft, I said, and I have texts showing you encouraged Mom to sell the car. Her face flushed. That's not the same as being responsible. Legally, it might be, I replied. Morally, it definitely is. While she argued, my mother's phone buzzed with a notification. It lit up the screen, and I saw the preview just enough to read the words, "Loan payment due." Sienna's balance still unpaid. In that moment, everything aligned: the favoritism, the excuses, the rushed sale. My parents had been silently drowning in debt from covering Sienna's choices, and instead of confronting her, they'd chosen to take from me. Again. The room felt suffocating as I looked at all three of them. This ends now, I said. Either we fix this together honestly, responsibly, or I walk away and let the law handle it. For the first time in my entire life, none of them had anything to say. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was the sound of an entire family structure cracking open. I invited my family to my place because I needed space that didn't carry my mother's influence. I needed them on neutral ground, mine, not hers. When they arrived, they walked in with the same mix of annoyance and defensiveness they'd displayed my whole life. Sienna kept her sunglasses on as if she were still on the cruise. My father hovered behind my mother like a shadow waiting for permission to breathe. I had already laid everything on the dining table: the fraudulent bill of sale screenshots of messages, the garage photos, the neighbor's text. It wasn't arranged for drama. It was arranged for clarity, so none of them could claim confusion or miscommunication again. When everyone settled, I spoke from the first-person place I had avoided for 30 years. I told them what it felt like to grow up as the designated strong one, the one expected to sacrifice, the one never granted softness or consideration. I told them what it meant to pour years of work into something only to have it dismissed in a heartbeat. I told them how their actions didn't just cause financial chaos, they humiliated me, endangered me legally, and made it clear they never took my boundaries seriously. My mother immediately latched onto the familiar defense. We're family. There's nothing here that can't be forgiven. Why make this bigger than it needs to be? My father's expression wavered, torn between taking responsibility and retreating into silence. He opened his mouth twice before shutting it again. Sienna shrugged, leaning back. I didn't sell anything. I just suggested it. Mom thought it was a good idea. Don't pin this on me. I slid the evidence toward her, the messages she'd sent encouraging the sale, the screenshots where she implied my car was collecting dust, the photo of my mother literally handing the keys to the buyer. Her face tightened, but she didn't look away. This isn't speculation, I said. This is what happened. The discussion spiraled quickly into raised voices, shattered illusions, and buried pain clawing its way to the surface. I spoke about the lifetime of being dismissed. My mother flinched, not because she disagreed, but because hearing it spoken aloud disrupted the story she'd always told herself. You make it sound like we abused you, she said, voice trembling between defensiveness and something softer. I make it sound like I existed, I answered. And none of you noticed. Sienna rolled her eyes. You're acting like the victim because of one car. You always need to be dramatic. That comment lit the fuse. This isn't about a car, I said. This is about 30 years of being treated as if my job was to carry everyone else. The room went dead still. Then I set the terms. You have two options, I said. You take responsibility financially and legally. All of you. Or I go to the police and let Elliot handle this through the system. My mother's breath hitched. My father's hands shook. Sienna's sunglasses finally came off. My father spoke first quietly, almost too quietly. I've been afraid to disagree with your mother, he said. She always took the lead with you kids. I let it happen because it was easier. That's on me. I should have stood up for you. The confession stunned the room. Even Sienna turned toward him in shock. My mother's composure cracked next. She lowered herself into a chair, as if the gravity finally got to her. I always thought you were strong, she whispered. Stronger than Sienna. I thought you didn't need anything. I didn't realize how deep this would go. I didn't realize I was hurting you. Tears slipped down her face, the first honest ones I'd seen in years. And the car, she added, I didn't think it would become something like this. I thought I was doing what parents do, helping one child through another. That's the problem, I said. You never saw me as someone who also needed help. I laid the final plan on the table. Repay Elliot the full $40,000 plus $6,000 in damages. Sign a notarized apology, acknowledging wrongdoing. Commit to never involving themselves in my or Kai's property again. Attend 8 weeks of family therapy to address the pattern that led us here. My mother broke completely, then sobbing openly. I don't want to lose you, she choked out. You already did, I said. This is your chance to earn me back. Silence tightened around us like a wire. My father picked up the pen first and signed. Sienna looked at me with defiance, then at the evidence, then at my father's bowed head, and signed. My mother hesitated the longest. Her hand trembled. Her breathing shook. But finally, slowly, she placed her signature beside the others. No one spoke afterward. The room vibrated with the weight of what had finally been acknowledged and what could no longer be undone. The chapter ended in a silence sharp enough to draw blood. Kai and I drove to Santa Fe to meet Elliot in person. The tension in the air wasn't antagonistic anymore, it was procedural, cautious. We handed him the bank draft for the refund, the compensation documents, and the notarized apology. He read everything carefully before signing the agreement to void the sale and close the matter permanently. The moment he put his signature down, something loosened in my chest. Not relief, just the awareness that the worst was finally past. We retrieved Kai's replica from his storage unit in New Mexico. I walked around the car, slowly inspecting each surface. Knowing what had happened, what this car had been mistakenly dragged into, gave it a strange symbolic weight. It wasn't just a stand-in vehicle anymore, it had become the catalyst that exposed every fracture in my family. Back in Texas, the terms of the agreement began unfolding quickly. My parents applied for a home equity loan to cover the bulk of the repayment. Sienna, angry, embarrassed, humbled, sold off her designer collection and contributed what she owed. They didn't want to, but responsibility doesn't ask for comfort. Sienna started applying for real jobs, and within a month she moved to Dallas for a position in marketing. One day she texted me a message that surprised me more than anything she'd said all year. Thank you for forcing me to face reality. I didn't know how stuck I was. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a beginning. My father reached out more than he ever had before. He asked if I would help him restore an old pickup from my grandfather's ranch. Slowly, steadily, we began working side by side each weekend. I watched him take interest, show effort, ask questions, things I'd never seen him do when I was young. My mother began therapy, and for once, she didn't resist the process. She entered each session acknowledging her patterns, her need for control, her blind spots. She apologized without excuses, without defensiveness, even when the room got heavy. I didn't forgive immediately, but I listened. One morning I took the real Viper out alone and drove the winding road along Lake Travis. The engine roared the way my grandfather taught me to appreciate steady, honest, alive. And somewhere between the curves of that road and the reflection of the lake, I realized how far I'd come. This wasn't about a car. It never had been. It was about the years I'd allowed myself to shrink for the sake of peace. It was about reclaiming the parts of me I had let go so my family could stay comfortable. The road trip turned into reflection. Reflection turned into clarity. Clarity turned into resolve. In the weeks that followed, my family shifted subtly but undeniably. At a dinner one Sunday, my parents asked how I was doing before talking about themselves. Sienna shared stories from work without bragging or playing victim. My mother remained quiet when others spoke, letting conversations breathe in ways she never used to. The pain wasn't gone, but it wasn't dominating me anymore. I ended the chapter the only way I knew how, with honesty. I was healing. I was learning to forgive. And for the first time I felt seen for who I actually was. Not the strong one, not the responsible one, not the fallback plan, just me. I looked at the Viper waiting in the garage when I got home, cobalt blue gleaming in the afternoon light. It wasn't just a dream fulfilled. It was a reminder I deserve respect. I deserve boundaries. I deserve a life that is mine. And that was the road I finally chose. In the weeks after everything settled, I found myself standing in my garage one evening, the light fading into a soft amber glow across the hood of the Viper. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I didn't quite recognize: peace. Not perfection, not some sudden fairy tale reconciliation, but a quieter, steadier peace that came from finally choosing myself. It's strange how a single moment, a single betrayal can crack open 30 years of silence. But maybe it's even stranger how those cracks can become the place where light finally gets in. I realized something important: boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. And for years I kept mine wide open, hoping my family would walk through with respect. Instead, they walked in with expectations, assumptions, and a confidence that I would always bend to keep the peace. What happened wasn't just about a car, it was about finally closing a door that should have been closed long ago, and then choosing carefully who I let back in. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a switch. It's a long road with winding turns, and some days the road is smoother than others. Some days the past tugs harder. Some days the old resentment flickers even when I don't want it to. But healing doesn't require perfection, just movement. And I'm moving. Slowly, steadily, honestly. My family is moving too. Not because I demanded change, but because I finally made space for them to choose it. And maybe that's what growth really is: not forcing people to become who you want them to be, but holding your ground long enough for them to meet you halfway. My father shows up differently now. My sister is learning responsibility for the first time. My mother is finally examining the things she never questioned. Progress doesn't erase the hurt, but it gives it purpose. If there's one thing I hope someone listening takes from my story, it's this: your worth is not measured by how much you tolerate or how much you give up or how quietly you carry the weight for others. You're allowed to protect what matters to you, whether it's a dream car or your peace or the version of yourself you've worked so hard to become. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to draw lines. And you're allowed to build a life that doesn't revolve around keeping everyone else comfortable. I think about my grandfather a lot lately. About the afternoons in his garage, the smell of oil and dust, the hum of the radio, the slow patience in his voice when he showed me how to loosen a stubborn bolt. Machines don't lie, he said. You treat them right, they'll give you everything they've got. Funny how that ended up being a lesson about people too, about who deserved space in my life and who had to earn a second chance. And now, standing here listening to the Viper settle into that familiar post-drive warmth, I finally feel like I'm stepping into the version of myself he always believed I could be. Not defined by what I provide or what I fix or what I sacrifice, but by what I choose. If you've been listening to my story, I hope in some small way it reminds you that it's okay to choose yourself too. Before you go, I'd genuinely love to know that you were here with me. If you're still listening, drop a listening in the comments or tell me where you're tuning in from. I always find comfort in knowing someone out there heard this, maybe even felt a little less alone because of it. And if my story resonated with you, if it made you think of your own boundaries or your own family, or the way you've had to rebuild yourself, I hope you'll consider subscribing. It means more than you know to have someone stay, listen, and walk this journey with me a little further. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hearing me. And wherever you are, I hope you're choosing yourself too.